My name is Tasfash Farrao and I'm working in STEMpower as an IT expert. On this video I will show you how virtual computer lab is configured. First, let's assemble our monitor. After finishing the assembling process, we can go for mounting the zero client. The zero client will be mounted at the back of the monitor. Then keyboard, mouse, power cable and VGA cable will be plugged on the zero client. This is a TP-Link switch. It is used for connecting computers each other. It has its own power cable and have 50 ports. For our case, we have 31 computers, including the server. So in order to connect these 31 computers each other, we need to have an equivalent number of ports. Since our TP-Link switch have 50 ports, that means we are safe, even we have an extra one. For our switch, we need to have a holder. We call it Ruck. This is a switch rack. It is used for holding our switch. So let's mount this switch rack. After mounting our switch rack on the wall, we can start to measure the length of all the computers from the switch position. Now we have already the length value of all the 31 computers from the switch position. So we can cut the network cable accordingly. Now we can start to crimp our network cable. But before start crimping, we do have two types of cabling. The first one is crossover cabling. The second one is straight through cabling. When we say crossover cabling, it is used for connecting two similar devices. That means it may be from computer to computer, or switch to switch, or router to router. When we come to the second type of cabling, that means the straight through cabling, it is used for connecting different devices. That means it may be from computer to switch or from switch to router. In our case, since we are connecting our computers to switch, it is a straight through cabling. So in order to perform this straight through cabling, it has its own standard. That means while we are arranging the wires, it has its own arrangement. That means from the left, white orange will come, then orange, white or green, blue, white blue, green, white brown, and brown. This is a straight through cabling arrangement. After arranging with this order, we can insert into the RJ45, and using the crimper, we can crimp the cable. After crimping, we have to test the cable. In order to test the cable, we need to have a tester. So on this tester, first we have to test it whether it is crimped correctly or not. For example, in my case, here it says pass. Sometimes the network tester may show fail. If it fails, we have to crimp it again. Now crimping is over and 31 network cable is ready for the 31 computers. Then all the 31 network cables will be plugged on the switch port. After plugging on the switch port, we have to hide the cables through the trunking cable. Now we can start to plug the network cable on our switch port. To do that, we can plug the network cable in any of the ports, but we need to have an appropriate labeling. This appropriate labeling is used for further troubleshooting. For example, this cable is labeled as 2, so it's better to insert this cable at port 2 of our switch. The other cables will be plugged like this. Then port 49 and 50 is reserved for the server, so it is recommended to plug your server cable at port 49 or 50. Then we start to hide the network cable. In order to hide the network cable, we need to have the switch as a trunking cable. Through this trunking cable, we can hide the our network cables. This process, we call it trunking. After trunking the network cable, one end will plug in the 0 client. So it will be repeated for the 30 computers or 0 clients. One will plug on the server system unit. After that, all the system units, all the monitors have 0 client, keyboard, mouse, power cable, VGA cable, and network connection. So through this network connection, it will start to share the resources of the server. Now physical connection is over. That means all the computers are physically connected through the network cable. The next step will be how these computers will communicate through each other. Okay, it is known that communication will be performed through their own IP address. So all the 31 computers need to have an IP address. In order to set an IP address for the computers, we do have two approaches. The first one is static IP assignment, and the second one is dynamic IP assignment. Now let's apply both the IP assignments. That means let's give an IP address statically. At the same time, let's give an IP address dynamically. Let's start from static IP assignment. On this static IP assignment, we'll give an IP address for all the computers manually, including our server. In order to do that, first, my network place, and for example, on the IP address of my server, let me give 192.168.1.1. This will be an IP address for the server. Then we'll go to our clients. On our client, we will give an IP address 192.168.1, and the last digit must be different from 1, because since static IP, we are giving static IP, and this static IP must be unique for each computers. So 1 is already for the server. Then for the client computer, it has to be different from 1. So let me give 2 for this computer. Then on the default gateway place, we'll give our server IP address. Then we'll press on login. Then login will be performed. On this static IP assignment, the main challenge will be we have to remember the IP address that is given for each or every computers, because we have already said that IP address must be unique and it will be for one computer. So if the number of computers are increased, it will be difficult to remember the assigned IP address. So because of these difficulties, we will go for the dynamic IP assignment. This dynamic IP assignment is performed by configuring DHCP configuration. When we say DHCP, dynamic host configuration protocol, that means our server will configure this DHCP or dynamic host configuration protocol. After configuring this DHCP, the server will start to give an IP address for all the clients. To do that, we'll open our server manager dashboard. On our server manager dashboard, then you'll press on manage, and on manage drop down list, add roles and features wizard will display. On this, you will press next. Then you will include the DHCP server protocol by clicking on the DHCP server. Then you will press on the tools menu and press on the DHCP. On your DHCP window, press on IP, right click on the IP version port and press or click scope. Actually, this scope is used to have different pool. For example, you may need to have printer pool and like. Then you'll give your own scope name. Then it will ask you an IP address range. This IP address ranges from which IP address to which IP address will give your server. So, for example, here, let me give start IP address 192.168.1.1. end IP address 192.168.100. That means my server will give or allocate an IP address for the clients from 1 up to 100. Then it will ask you to give an excluded IP address. This excluded IP address means while the server assign an IP address, it will not be assigned dynamically. This is used for mostly it is used for static IP address assignment. For example, you may need to have statically to give an IP address, just like, for example, if you have an IP, if you have a network printer, you need to give an IP address statically. So you can give the IP address from this excluded range. Then list duration window will come. On this list duration, you will set the duration for the scope leases when it is detected by the server. Then on the router or default gateway, we'll give the IP address of our server. That means the IP address of our server is 192.168.1 and 1. Then we'll press add. For our case, we'll not configure DNS, so we'll skip the DNS server configuration. At the same time, we'll skip also the Wins server configuration. Then we already finished the DHCP configuration. Then we'll go to the client computer and we'll tick on the obtain an IP address automatically. After clicking on the obtain an IP address automatically checkbox, it will start to get an IP address from the server and start to log into the server. That means server. As a remark, please notice that the following materials are missed from the virtual items package that you received. These are VGA or HDMI cable, trunking cable, RJ45, and cable tie. Since these materials are necessary for the installation of the virtual lab, so you need to buy this first. Safety rules of the 3D printer. The first one is, since the 3D printer has motorized and heated parts, always be aware of the possible hazards when the printer is operational. Never open the electronics case when the printer is powered on. Never touch the nozzle or heater block without first turning off the hot end and allowing it to completely cool down. Never place flammable materials or liquids on or near the printer when it is powered on or operational. Never put your fingers in any moving parts, including belts, pulleys, or gears when the printer is operational. Finally, you have to make sure to ground yourself before touching the printer. This is a mini 3D printer. It is used for printing 3D model prototypes. It has manual, cutter, bed plaster, memory that have Cura software and different sample G-code files. At the same time, filaments also there with different colors. This filament is used as an input for our 3D printer. That means it is just like a paper for the normal printer that we know. Then the 3D printer will be inserted through the feeder until it reaches into the nozzle of the 3D printer. Then we'll go for the setting part. On the setting part, first we have to set temperature. For this PLA filament, the recommended temperature is around 200 degrees centigrade. XYZ position also needs to be set, but the auto home is recommended one. Then we can start printing. The printing process can be from memory or directly from the computer through USB cable. But always we have to convert the file into its equivalent G-code files. For this, Cura software is already installed in the computer. At the same time, there is a Cura setup software inside the memory for you can use it for or you can install on another computer. After finishing the printing process, we have to wait until the 3D printer nozzle cool down before picking up the printed prototype. Now we are almost finalizing the server configuration part today. So what we did up to now, the first on our first day or on our starting time, we were trying to fix or to mount the thin client or zero client part on our monitor. After that, we immediately started to crimp the network cable. After crimping our network cable, we start to trunk. Then, after finishing the trunking part, we came back to the server side, and on our server side, we tried to configure the DHCP configuration. At the same time, we tried to use static IP address in order to log the clients to our server. This is all about this virtual lab. So why we say this is a virtual lab, or why we need this virtual lab? The virtual lab, if you see, we do have 30 monitors. These 30 monitors is acting as if they have their own system unit, but they use only one system unit. That's why we call it virtual lab. So this virtual lab main advantages. The first one, it will bring around 70% cost off. What I mean, for example, if I need to install these 30 monitors, and if it costs 100,000 baht, you can have this access by 25,000 baht, and like. The first advantage is cost. The second advantage is central. It will provide central administration. When you say central administration, for example, I can sit on the server side and I can monitor all the clients by sitting on the server side. The other advantage is, for example, I may want to buy licensed software. So for 30 nodes, it cost me to have 30 license code. But by having or by buying one license code, or by having one license ID, the other 30 monitors can share this. The other thing, it will provide environment friendliness. When I say environment friendliness, this all will wear out and you will dispose one day. At that time, you need you don't need to dispose 30 motherboards, because you have only one motherboard. You will dispose that. Mostly environment pollution will be because of your motherboard, so it will have good environment friendliness. The last thing what we have done is we try to install the 3D printer. This was all about our job. Thank you.